When I began to preach in Unitarian Universalist churches in the early 1990s, I was a circuit rider. I preached a lot of places: Valdosta, Vero Beach, Ocala, Panama City, Jacksonville. Every time I stood before a congregation for the first time, I opened in the same way. I did it here as well my first time. I said that I was nervous. I told them that I felt a little like the man who went to his psychiatrist and said, "Doc, you have to help me. I'm a teepee, I'm a wigwam. I'm a teepee, I'm a wigwam." The doctor said, "Relax, you're too tense." I don't tell that joke anymore. After one service, a little boy came up to me. "When I grow up, I'm going to give you lots of money." "Oh, well, thank you. That's so nice," I said. "But why?" "Because my daddy says you're the poorest preacher we ever had." You need to be careful what you say around children. Dr. Benjamin Spock once said there are only two things a child will share willingly: communicable diseases and his mother's age. One time a minister's wife invited some people from the church to dinner. The minister thought it would be cute to ask his 6-year-old daughter to say the blessing. "I wouldn't know what to say," the little girl objected. "Just say what you hear Mommy say." The daughter bowed her head and said, "Dear Lord, why did I invite all these boring people to dinner?" I'm wearing this robe today in honor of the somber occasion and in honor of the Reverend John DeWolf Hurt, my first and favorite UU preacher. John is responsible for me becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister. He encouraged and mentored me, and he set me up in Valdosta, the church I served for 7 years, my first church. This is actually John's robe. This I stole. This stole was made for me by a church member, but the robe belonged to John. John's wife, Mary Louise, also a UU minister and co-founder of the church in Valdosta, Georgia, honored me with this robe after John died in 1996. Mary Louise passed away in April of just last year, 2022. It was a month after my heart attack, so I actually just found out about it this week while perusing the UUA website for material. Rest in peace, Mary Louise. Oh, thank you. Yes.
Hold on. That's the camera. There you go.
Even better.
It's like a routine.
Unplanned. Perfect. Reverend John and I had a lot in common. We were both former Southern Baptists. Our paths to ministry both passed through Louisville, Kentucky, by way of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. John was the funniest, most heartwarming minister I have ever known. In the days of the Florida District, there was an annual John DeWolf Hurt Levity Award given out to the funniest minister in his. I never won it, but I've always aspired to be as good a preacher as John. He wrote a book about his early experiences in ministry. It's called Sharks in the Baptistry. Yeah. See, that's really funny if you know what a baptistry is, or a Baptist. The book is about cutting his teeth on ministry in the Deep South. He was born in 1920 and raised in Georgia and Louisiana, so he knows. In his book, he wrote, "Those who need it the most are often the hardest to love. But isn't that what ministry is all about?" That isn't a bit funny, but it's the kind of man he was. I think humor helped. And it's the kind of minister I try to be. Well, the final hurdle for anyone entering the UU ministry is a big oral exam we all must pass in front of the dreaded Ministerial Fellowship Committee, the MFC. Part of the grueling process requires that one deliver to them a short sermon. So to prepare, I asked my colleagues in the Florida district to conduct for me a mock-up interview. I wish that Reverend DeWolf Hurt was there for that. I broke the ice the way I always did by telling my wigwam joke. Those ministers sat stone-faced and silent, not even a groan. When I finished my sermon, one of them began her critique by asking if I had ever taken preaching classes. She recommended that I do so, noting how unprofessional and off-putting it was to open a sermon by telling jokes like that. I never had the nerve to ask if she meant telling jokes like that or telling jokes in general. But ever since that time, I have made it a point to include humor in my sermons as often as possible. I'm ornery that way. The Reverend Dr. John Young, another mentor of mine with a sense of humor, told his Jacksonville congregation, of which I was a part, "I grew up in a home where wordplay was our daily bread, and so I punned with the best of them. But I found during my ministry that some of those puns were seen by a few people as smart aleck, wise guy, smarter than thou mistakes that made me less ministerial in their eyes. So I overcame my learned inclination," he said, "but it took some of the fun out of my life." Reverend Young said, "I thought the puns humanized me and lightened the atmosphere in the midst of serious business. But humor is in the eye of the beholder, and it can be dangerous to be misunderstood by those to whom you are beholden." I must say, thankfully, that these opinions do not represent most UUs I know. Now, I have been chastened for a number of things I chose to do in worship services. Announcements, types of meditation, children's stories, my clothes, my hair, the readings, what time we took the offering, joys and concerns, wearing a robe, not wearing a robe. What else takes place in a service? Oh yes, the music. Music may be the most criticized element of a UU service, besides perhaps the sermon. It's often said, as you know, that we are a church with bad singers because we're always what?
Reading ahead to see if we agree with the words.
Reading ahead to see if we like the words. But we enjoy our music here. I'm so proud of you. We have singers. We have singers in the Presbyterian Church. atheists hiding among them. There is no God. Now, I understand it takes all people to make this crazy world go round. If we didn't have our serious, somber people, who would run those 24-hour news channels? I just feel sorry for someone with no sense of humor. The poet E.E. Cummings wrote, "The most wasted of days is one without laughter." But is humor spiritual? Is laughter good for the soul? Does comedy have a place in ministry, in church? I certainly hope so. You know what I am going to say. George Bernard Shaw said, if you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh. Otherwise, they'll kill you. If we wouldn't laugh, we would all go insane. I know you're thinking of Jimmy. Robert Frost wrote it. Jimmy Buffett sang it. And that great Unitarian Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "The earth laughs in flowers." According to UU minister David Weisbard, humor may very well be the saving grace of religion and humanity itself. Without a sense of humor, he said, we would be less wise, less loving, and downright dull. Rabbi and psychologist Label Wolf, yes, Wolf, said laughter is one of the most mystical expressions of a human being. And G.K. Chesterton wrote, "It is the test of a good religion if you can joke about it. That makes ours one great faith." No one jokes about religion more than you use. And everybody jokes about us. We have been mentioned on The Simpsons so many times. Garrison Keillor used to pick on us all the time. We don't mind. Free advertising. One new member at the Santa Monica Community Church in California said she had never heard of us until a Prairie Home Companion. If Garrison Keillor learned one thing, it's that arguing with a UU is like wrestling with a pig. Pretty soon you realize the pig likes it. We even like to joke about ourselves. What do you get when you cross a UU with a Jehovah's Witness? Yeah, someone who goes around knocking on doors for no apparent reason. Since Unitarian means one, and Universalist means everything, then we believe in one of everything. You might be a UU if you think the Holy Trinity is reduce, reuse, and recycle. You might be a UU if you get email from committees, gay, you didn't even know you were on. The Bible is a book that deals with emotions. God gets angry. David gets jealous. Adam and Eve get embarrassed. Job gets depressed. And there's a great story about humor in the very first book, in Genesis. I've shared this with you before. God visits Abraham. He's 99 years old. Abe, not God. God tells Abraham that he will be the father of a multitude of nations. Kings will come from you. Says God, not a bad gig for an old man. And I will give you all the land of your sojourning. Everywhere you go is yours. All the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. They're still fighting over that one in the Middle East. Then God tells him, next year you and your wife Sarah are going to have a son. Well, Abraham fell on his face. They do that a lot in the Old Testament. He is fall down laughing. He says to himself, right, a man 100-year-old and a 90-year-old wife are going to have a baby. Sure. It says this in the Bible. Sarah, meanwhile, is eavesdropping behind the tent flap. Wouldn't you if God were talking to your spouse? And she laughs too, though it's a womanly laugh, we're told. What's a womanly laugh? I hear a few. Quietly. She doesn't roll on the ground. Here's the punchline. God says, that's funny, is it? Well, it's going to happen. And not only that, but now you're going to name him Isaac. Get it? No, because guess what Isaac means? It means pig wrestler. No, I made that up. It means he laughs. He laughs. Now there's a name to live up to in school. Wouldn't that be like naming your kid Chuckles? And this is the man with whom God is going to establish an everlasting covenant. Chuckles. Does good? Oh yeah, Chuckles is a main character in the Old Testament. Isaac was the father of Jacob and Esau, and that
Jewish people trace their lineage.
yeah, and the Muslims, which is why there's a big war going on. Does God have a sense of humor or what? God will fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouting. Job 8:21. A joyful heart causes good healing. Proverbs 17:22. I love that one especially. Dr. Paul McGee says, your sense of humor is one of the most powerful tools you have to support good health. Laughter relaxes the whole body. Laughter boosts the immune system. Laughter triggers the release of endorphins, the body's natural feel-good chemicals. Laughter protects the heart. Laughter burns calories. Laughter lightens anger's heavy load. Laughter may even help you to live longer. What's so funny about Unitarian Universalism? Reverend David Weisbarg, 27 years the senior minister of Rockford, Illinois, says what's so funny is that we can laugh at ourselves. We can giggle about our faith. We can guffaw about our world. We can even chuckle about death. What's so funny is that life is absurd as well as profound. It is filled with love as well as hate, wisdom as well as stupidity, courage as well as fear. Our laughter, he says, gives us humility. And our religious path at times looks as orderly as a labyrinth, and at other times like a drunk staggering to the outhouse. Amen. Namaste. Praise the Lord. I love you. Go in laughter.